When my wife decided I shouldn't attend her company event to avoid tension with someone from her past, I stepped back quietly, and that choice revealed more than she expected. The sentence landed between us like a dropped glass, sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore, on a Thursday evening in late spring when the kitchen smelled of garlic and rosemary from the roast I'd put in the oven hours earlier. Emily stood at the island, still in her work blazer, scrolling through her phone with that distracted focus she gets when she's rehearsing a difficult conversation in her head. "The gala next month," she said without looking up at first. "It's going to be a big one. Clients, the whole C-suite, everyone networking like their bonuses depend on it." I nodded, stirring the pan of risotto, already picturing the rented tux I hadn't worn since our wedding anniversary 3 years ago. Then she continued, voice dropping half an octave. "Mark will be there. You remember Mark." Of course I remembered Mark. The name had surfaced only twice in our 10-year marriage. Once during a late-night talk when we were still dating, when she'd admitted he was the one who got away before she met me, the college boyfriend who'd left for grad school abroad and never came back the same way, and again 5 years ago when he joined her firm as a senior consultant, the same company where she'd risen to marketing director. Each mention had been brief, careful, wrapped in assurances that it was ancient history, professional only, nothing more. But this time, her eyes met mine and held. "I think it would be easier if you didn't come. Not because I don't want you there, I do, but because things could get awkward. He's still single, still flirty in that harmless way, and I don't want anyone misreading anything or making it weird for the team." The words hung there, reasonable on the surface, layered with something unspoken underneath. I set the wooden spoon down, wiped my hands on the dish towel, and studied her face, the slight flush on her cheeks, the way her fingers tightened around her phone. Part of me wanted to push back, to ask why his presence should dictate mine after a decade of building a life together, why avoiding tension meant I was the one who stayed home instead of him keeping his distance. But another part, the quieter, more observant part, recognized the opening she'd just given me, without realizing it. So I didn't argue. I didn't demand explanations or list the times I'd stood beside her at her events, smiling through small talk with colleagues who barely remembered my name. Instead, I nodded slowly, said, "Okay, if that's what you think is best, I'll sit this one out." Her relief was immediate and visible. Shoulders dropping, a small exhale, the phone finally set face down on the counter. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping around the island to kiss my cheek. "I knew you'd understand." We ate dinner like nothing had changed. Talked about Lila's upcoming kindergarten orientation, Rowan's obsession with dinosaurs, the leaky faucet in the guest bath we still hadn't fixed, but something had shifted in the air between us, subtle as a draft from a window left cracked overnight. The next few weeks passed in ordinary rhythm, school drop-offs, soccer practices, late evenings where she worked on her presentation slides while I read bedtime stories to the kids. I didn't mention the gala again, didn't ask who was going or what she was wearing, or whether Mark had RSVP'd. I simply stepped back, quietly, the way a tide recedes before a wave builds. I took on extra carpools, volunteered for the bake sale she usually handled, cooked her favorite meals on nights she came home exhausted. When she asked if I was okay with missing the event, I smiled and said, "I'm fine. Go shine. You always do." And I meant it, mostly. The night of the gala arrived on a clear June evening. She left in the navy dress she'd bought last fall, hair swept up, earrings I'd given her for our 8th anniversary catching the hallway light. I kissed her goodbye at the door, told her to have fun, texted her a heart emoji when she sent a selfie from the venue's marble lobby. Then I turned off my phone notifications, poured a glass of bourbon I rarely drank, and sat on the back porch watching fireflies blink across the lawn while the kids slept upstairs. No rage, no brooding jealousy, just a deliberate stillness, the kind you choose when you want to see clearly. Around 11:30, my phone lit up with a string of messages from her. Photos of the dessert table, a group shot with her team, a blurry candid of the dance floor. Then, at 12:17 a.m., a voice note instead of text. I hit play, speaker low so I wouldn't wake the house. Her voice came through soft, a little slurred from champagne, background music fading in and out. "Hey, I miss you. It's weird not having you here. Mark asked about you, said he was surprised you didn't come. I told him you had a thing with the kids. He laughed, said maybe next time. But I don't know. Being here without you feels off, like I'm performing instead of just being. I think I made a mistake asking you to stay home." She paused, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "I love you. Come home soon?" "Wait, you are home. I mean, I'm coming home to you, soon." The message ended with a small, embarrassed laugh. I didn't reply right away. I let the words settle, felt the weight of them shift something inside me. Not anger, not vindication exactly, but clarity. When she walked through the door at 1:45 a.m., heels in hand, makeup slightly smudged, she found me still on the porch, bourbon mostly untouched. She sat beside me without speaking for a minute, head resting on my shoulder. After a long minute, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I thought keeping things easy would make the night better. It didn't. It made me realize how much I lean on you being there, even when nothing dramatic happens. You not being in the room felt louder than any conversation with Mark ever could." I wrapped an arm around her, kissed the top of her head. "I know." We sat like that until the fireflies dimmed and the neighborhood quieted completely. No big fight, no ultimatums, just the slow recognition that my quiet step back had done what words or arguments never could. It had shown her the shape of our life without me in it for one night, and the absence had spoken volumes. In the weeks that followed, she started inviting me to smaller work dinners, introducing me with pride instead of careful neutrality, even joking once that Mark had asked if I was coming to the next retreat, and she'd told him, always, he's not an option. The choice I'd made, to step back quietly instead of pushing forward aggressively, hadn't just avoided tension, it had revealed the strength of what we'd built, the way trust isn't proven in grand gestures, but in the small, deliberate silences where love gets to show itself without interference. And in that revelation, both of us found something deeper than reassurance. We found certainty that the life we shared was sturdy enough to weather old shadows, new doubts, and even the occasional misstep, because at the center of it was a partnership that didn't need to shout to be heard. The weeks after the gala unfolded with the deceptive calm of a river that looks still on the surface while currents pull hard underneath. Emily came home the next morning after crashing at a colleague's downtown condo because the venue was too far for a late-night drive. And when she walked through the door, hair slightly mussed, navy dress wrinkled, carrying her heels, she looked at me with a mixture of sheepishness and something softer, almost vulnerable. She set her clutch on the hall table, kicked off her shoes properly this time, and wrapped her arms around me without a word. I held her back, breathing in the faint scent of champagne and her perfume, and neither of us spoke about the voice note or the apology it carried until the kids were at school and the house settled into mid-morning quiet. We sat at the kitchen island with fresh coffee, sunlight slanting across the granite, and she traced the rim of her mug before saying, "I spent half the night looking for you in the crowd, even though I knew you weren't there. Every time someone asked where my husband was, I heard myself giving the same excuse, family thing, and it felt like a lie. Not because I was hiding anything, but because it wasn't the full truth. The full truth is I asked you to stay home so I wouldn't have to navigate old feelings in front of people, and instead I spent the evening navigating the absence of you." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I reached across to cover her hand with mine. "I didn't want to make it harder for you," I said simply, "but I also didn't want to pretend I wasn't hurt." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You weren't pretending, you were just quiet, and that quiet was louder than any fight we could have had." We talked for almost 2 hours about Mark's easy charm that still turned heads, about how seeing him laugh with the same group of colleagues she used to share inside jokes with had stirred old insecurities she thought were buried, about how asking me to step aside had felt like protecting the professional version of herself while unintentionally sidelining the personal one. I listened without interrupting, letting her unpack the layers she'd kept neatly folded for years. When she finished, I told her what the night had shown me, that my presence wasn't optional decoration at her events, it was part of the foundation we'd built, and removing it, even for one evening, made the whole structure feel unsteady. She agreed, wiped her eyes, and said, "Next time, you're coming. No discussion." I smiled. Good, because I was planning to anyway. Life didn't snap back to perfect overnight. Old habits die slowly, and Emily still caught herself over-explaining when Mark's name came up in work conversations, still hesitated before inviting me to smaller team dinners. But the difference was in the small corrections she made herself. She'd forward me the invite first, ask what I thought of the menu, text me silly selfies from the venue bathroom mirror with captions like, "Wish you were here to tell me this dress isn't too much." I went when I could, stood beside her with a hand on her lower back during introductions, shook Mark's hand firmly and asked polite questions about his latest project, without a trace of tension in my voice. He was gracious, charming as ever, but the dynamic had shifted in a way only Emily and I could feel. My quiet choice to step back had recalibrated the balance, reminding her and him that I wasn't threatened by history, because our present was solid. At home, the changes were subtler but deeper. She started leaving her work phone face down during dinner, no longer jumping to answer every notification. We carved out one evening a week that was ours. No kids' activities, no laptops, just take out in a movie or a walk around the neighborhood, hands linked, talking about nothing and everything. The leaky faucet finally got fixed, not by me alone, but by both of us on a Saturday morning, laughing when the wrench slipped and water sprayed us both. The kids noticed the shift too. Lila asked once why Mommy seemed happier lately, and Rowan started insisting on family hugs before bed, piling into the middle of us until we were a tangle of limbs and giggles. One evening, about 4 months after the gala, Emily came home early from a client lunch, found me in the backyard teaching Rowan how to throw a frisbee, and watched from the porch steps for a minute before joining us. She slipped her arms around my waist from behind, chin on my shoulder, and whispered, "I almost lost sight of this. Thank you for not letting me." I turned, kissed her forehead. We both almost did, but we caught it. That night, after the kids were asleep, we sat on the couch with a bottle of red we'd been saving for no particular occasion. She rested her head in my lap, and I ran my fingers through her hair while she talked about a new campaign she was leading, excitement lighting her face the way it used to when we first met. Halfway through her story, she paused, looked up at me, and said, "You know what scared me most that night? Not Mark, not the networking, but realizing how much I'd started taking you for granted. You're not just my +1, you're the reason I can walk into those rooms at all." I leaned down, kissed her softly. "And you're the reason I want to be there." No grand declarations followed, no renewed vows or dramatic gestures, just the quiet certainty that we'd both chosen, again, to show up fully for each other. The company events continued, Mark remained a colleague, old history stayed exactly where it belonged, in the past, but every time Emily reached for my hand in a crowded room or glanced across a table to check if I was okay, I felt the echo of that one quiet choice I'd made, to step back instead of push forward, and how it had revealed the depth of what we had. It wasn't about winning an argument or proving a point, it was about creating the space for truth to surface on its own terms. And in that space, we found not just reassurance, but renewal, a marriage that didn't need to be defended because it was being lived, day after ordinary day, with eyes wide open and hearts fully present. The gala that once felt like a potential fracture had become, in retrospect, the moment we both remembered why we'd chosen each other in the first place, not to avoid tension, but to face it together, quietly, steadily, and without apology. Summer slipped into fall with the kind of gentle momentum that makes you forget how quickly time moves when things are finally right. The kids started school, Lila in kindergarten, proudly carrying a backpack almost as big as she was, Rowan in preschool, where he spent most days building elaborate block structures he insisted were dinosaur castles. Emily's work schedule eased slightly after the big campaign launch she'd been stressing over, and suddenly there were pockets of time we hadn't had in years. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, where she'd pick out the ripest peaches and I'd pretend to negotiate prices with vendors who knew us by name. Afternoons driving the kids to soccer practice, where we sat on the sidelines sharing a thermos of coffee and cheering louder than necessary when Rowan finally kicked the ball in the right direction. The gala that had once loomed like a test now felt like a distant memory, mentioned only in passing when Emily forwarded me invites to smaller events, team happy hours, client dinners, the annual holiday party, and each time she'd add a casual note. You in? I always was. Mark remained a background figure, polite when we crossed paths, never lingering too long in conversation, his charm still present but no longer carrying the weight it once had in her mind. I noticed how Emily no longer tensed when his name appeared in a work email or group chat. Instead, she'd read it aloud sometimes, roll her eyes at some corporate jargon he'd used, and move on without explanation or apology. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was steady, almost invisible, the way trust rebuilds itself brick by quiet brick after a crack has been acknowledged. One evening in early November, after the kids were in bed and the house smelled of cinnamon from the apple crisp we'd baked together, Emily curled up beside me on the couch with a glass of wine and said, "I've been thinking about last summer." I set my book down, turned to face her. "Yeah?" She nodded slowly. I keep replaying that night. Not just the gala, but the weeks before and after. How I convinced myself keeping you away would make things easier, cleaner. But all it did was make everything feel incomplete, like I was performing a version of myself that didn't include the most important part. I waited, letting her find the words. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not of Mark, really. He's just familiar. Safe in a way that doesn't ask anything of me. But you see everything. The good days, the stressed ones, the times I'm not polished or perfect. And I realized I'd started hiding parts of that from myself, pretending that if I controlled the optics at work, I could control how I felt inside." Her voice softened. "Asking you to stay home wasn't about avoiding tension with him. It was about avoiding tension with the version of me that still wonders if I'm enough without the spotlight. And you stepping back quietly, it forced me to sit with that question alone. Turns out I'm more than enough, with you there or not, but I'm better when you're beside me." I pulled her closer, kissed her temple. "You've always been enough. I just wanted you to remember it." We didn't need to dissect it further. The conversation felt like the final stitch in a wound that had already begun to heal. From then on, the small adjustments became habits. She'd text me during long meetings with silly emojis when someone said something ridiculous. I'd surprise her with lunch deliveries on deadline days. We'd plan date nights around her travel schedule instead of working around it. The kids thrived in the steadier atmosphere. Lila started drawing family portraits where everyone held hands in a perfect circle. Rowan demanded both mommy and daddy tuck-ins every night. Holidays came and went with the usual chaos. Thanksgiving at my parents', Christmas morning with wrapping paper everywhere, New Year's Eve where we let the kids stay up until midnight and toasted with sparkling cider while fireworks popped over the neighborhood. At the company's holiday party that December, Emily wore the same navy dress from the gala, but this time she reached for my hand the moment we walked in, introduced me to every colleague with a warmth that felt effortless, and when Mark approached with his easy smile and a "good to see you both," she leaned into me slightly and said, "Wouldn't miss it." No awkwardness, no overcompensation, just presence. Later, on the drive home, snow flurries starting to dust the windshield, she rested her head against the seat and murmured, "See? No tension. Just us." I glanced over, smiled. Just us? Spring brought a family trip to the coast, our first real vacation in years, where we rented a small beach house with creaky floors and an ocean view that stretched forever. The kids built sandcastles that collapsed spectacularly. We walked the shore at dawn collecting shells, and one evening while they slept inside, Emily and I sat on the steps watching waves roll in under moonlight. She slipped her hand into mine and said quietly, "I used to think love was about avoiding the hard parts. Now I know it's about walking through them together, even when one of us stumbles." I squeezed her fingers. We stumbled. We kept walking. She laughed softly, and we're still walking. Back home, life resumed its rhythm, school projects, soccer games, late-night talks on the porch when the world felt small and safe. Emily took on a new role at work, one that meant more travel but also more flexibility. She negotiated it with confidence, no longer second-guessing whether she deserved the opportunity. I kept doing what I'd always done, supporting, showing up, stepping back when needed, but never disappearing. And in the ordinary moments, the way she'd text me home soon after a long day, the way I'd leave her coffee on the counter with a heart drawn in the foam, the way the kids still piled into our bed during thunderstorms, we found proof that the choice I'd made to step back quietly hadn't just revealed her feelings, it had revealed ours. A marriage isn't tested by grand crises alone, but by the thousand small decisions to choose each other again and again. That summer night when she asked me to stay home had been one of those decisions gone sideways, but the quiet way I'd responded had turned it into a pivot point, a moment where absence spoke louder than argument, where space allowed truth to surface, and where both of us remembered that the strongest partnerships aren't the ones without tension, but the ones that face it, learn from it, and come out holding hands tighter than before. Years later, when the kids asked how we'd stayed married so long through busy careers and family chaos, we'd look at each other and smile, knowing the real answer started with a single, deliberate step back that let us both see forward more clearly. Winter arrived with the first real snowfall in years, blanketing the neighborhood in quiet white and turning ordinary routines into small adventures. The kids woke before dawn on the first snowy morning, pressing their noses to the window and begging to go outside before breakfast. So Emily and I bundled them up in layers of coats, scarves, and mismatched mittens, then joined them in the backyard to build what started as a snowman and ended as a lopsided snow fort complete with a moat dug with classic shovels. Emily laughed until her cheeks turned pink when Rowan tackled her into a drift, and Leela declared herself queen of the castle, issuing royal decrees from atop a pile of snowballs. I watched them all, my wife on her knees in the snow, hair escaping her knit hat, eyes bright with the kind of joy that doesn't need a reason, and felt the last faint echo of last summer's uncertainty dissolve completely. That evening, after hot chocolate and baths and stories read twice because Rowan insisted, Emily and I sat by the fireplace in the living room, the house settling around us with the soft creaks of old wood cooling. She tucked her feet under her, leaned against my shoulder, and said, "I've been thinking about how we got here." I waited, tracing lazy circles on her arm. Last year, I was so afraid of what might happen if old feelings surfaced in front of people who mattered professionally. I thought controlling the situation, keeping you away, would protect everything. But it almost cost me the one thing I can't replace. She paused, voice dropping. "You didn't fight me on it. You didn't demand to come or accuse me of anything. You just stepped back. And in that space, I saw how much I'd started compartmentalizing us, work Emily versus home Emily, and how exhausting it was to keep those versions separate." I nodded slowly. "I didn't step back to punish you. I stepped back because I trusted you to figure it out, and because I knew if I pushed, we'd both dig in." She turned to face me fully, eyes searching mine. "You trusted me even when I wasn't trusting myself. That's what broke the cycle. Not a big confrontation, but your quiet confidence that we're stronger together than apart." We didn't need to rehash the details again. The conversation felt like closing a book we'd both read enough times. Instead, we talked about the future. Maybe a bigger house with a yard the kids could really run in. Maybe a trip abroad once Rowan started kindergarten. Maybe just more nights like this one. Fire crackling, no agenda beyond being close. The company holiday party that year was different from the one before. Emily didn't just invite me, she planned her outfit around matching my tie, practiced her speech with me in the bathroom mirror, asked my opinion on every detail the way she used to before the doubt crept in. When we arrived, the ballroom was lit with thousands of tiny lights, music floating over conversations, and Mark was there. Same easy smile, same polished suit, but this time when he approached our table, Emily greeted him warmly, introduced me again as my husband, the one who keeps everything running at home, and stayed beside me the whole conversation, her hand occasionally brushing mine under the table. No tension, no overcompensation, just natural ease. Later, during the slow dances, she pulled me onto the floor without hesitation, head resting against my chest as we swayed. "This feels right," she whispered. "You here, me here, no missing pieces." I kissed the top of her head. Always right. Spring brought renewal in small, tangible ways. Emily accepted a promotion that meant leading a new team across departments, a role she'd once worried would pull her too far from family life. But now she negotiated boundaries with confidence. Remote Fridays, no emails after 7 p.m., time blocked for school events. I started a small woodworking hobby in the garage, building bookshelves and a play table for the kids, projects that gave me quiet satisfaction and let Emily tease me about becoming the handyman husband. The kids grew taller, louder, more independent. Leela writing her first short story about a girl who could talk to animals, Rowan insisting on helping with every home repair, until the garage smelled permanently of sawdust and glue. One afternoon in May, while the kids napped and rain tapped against the windows, Emily found me in the garage, sanding a shelf. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed and smiling softly. "You know what I realized today?" I set the sandpaper down, wiped my hands. "What?" "I used to think love needed protection from the world, old boyfriends, work stress, whatever. But the opposite is true. Love protects us. It's the thing that lets me walk into any room knowing I'm not alone in it. And you gave that back to me by letting me see what it felt like without you for one night." I stepped closer, pulled her into a hug that smelled of fresh wood and her shampoo. We gave it back to each other. She tilted her head up. "Yeah, we did." The years kept turning. Birthdays with too much cake, anniversaries celebrated quietly with takeout and old movies, summers at the beach house we finally rented every July, winters with snow forts and hot chocolate. Mark faded further into colleague status, mentioned only in passing work stories, never with the weight he once carried. Emily and I grew older together in the best way, laugh lines deepening from shared jokes, hands finding each other instinctively in crowds, conversations that started with "remember when?" and ended with "we'll get through this too." The choice I'd made to step back quietly had done more than reveal her feelings. It had revealed the resilience of what we'd built, the way a single act of restraint could open space for honesty, growth, and deeper connection. No marriage is perfect. There were still arguments over chores, nights when work stress spilled over, moments when old insecurities whispered, but we'd learned to meet them not with defensiveness or distance, but with the quiet certainty that we'd already survived a real test and come out stronger. And in every ordinary day since, that certainty showed itself in the way she still reached for my hand across the table, in the way I still showed up to every event she invited me to, in the way the kids grew up watching two people who chose each other every single day, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. The gala that started it all became family lore, a story we told with laughter now, the punchline always the same. Sometimes the best way to hold on is to let go for one night and trust that what's real will pull you back together. And it did, every time. The years began to stack themselves quietly, the way good books do on a shelf, each one building on the last without fanfare, yet together forming something substantial and comforting. Leela turned 8 that spring, all long limbs and endless questions about everything from why the sky is blue to whether dinosaurs ever had best friends, while Rowan, 6 now, had traded block towers for Lego spaceships that he insisted could actually fly if we believe hard enough. Emily's promotion had settled into a rhythm she genuinely enjoyed, leading strategy sessions with a team that respected her, traveling occasionally but always home for the important things, school plays where Leela played the lead tree again, this time remembering every line, soccer tournaments where Rowan scored his first goal and ran to the sidelines to high-five us both, quiet evenings when the 4 of us piled onto the couch for movie nights that inevitably ended with someone asleep on someone else's lap. The house we'd talked about buying finally became ours, a modest 2-story with a wide front porch, a backyard big enough for a swing set and summer barbecues, windows that caught golden afternoon light and made every room feel warmer. We moved in over one long chaotic weekend, friends helping carry boxes while the kids raced through empty rooms, claiming bedrooms and secret hiding spots. Emily and I stood in the kitchen at the end of the first day, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and takeout containers, and she looked around with a small, odd smile. "This is ours," she said softly. "All of it." I pulled her close. "Always was. We just found the right walls to put around it." That first night in the new house, after the kids finally crashed from exhaustion, we sat on the back steps under a sky thick with stars, sharing a blanket against the spring chill. Emily rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Remember when I thought keeping you out of one room would keep everything neat?" I chuckled low. "Hard to forget." She sighed. "I look back now and see how small I was making us, trying to manage perceptions instead of just living. You stepping back didn't just show me what I was missing, it showed me what I could lose if I kept prioritizing optics over us." I kissed her hair. We both learned. I could have pushed harder, demanded explanations, turned it into a fight, but staying quiet let the truth rise on its own. She nodded against me. And the truth was simple. I need you there, not as a prop, not as backup, but as the person who knows the unpolished version of me and loves it anyway. We didn't dwell on the past much anymore. It had become one of those stories couples tell with affectionate eye rolls. "Remember when Mom tried to bench Dad from the gala?" Leela would ask someday, and we'd laugh and explain that sometimes grown-ups need reminding that love isn't about avoiding discomfort, but walking through it hand in hand. Emily's work life continued to evolve. She mentored younger colleagues now, sharing stories of her own early career doubts and how she'd learned to stop hiding parts of herself. Mark had left the company 2 years earlier for a position overseas. The goodbye email he sent the team was professional, gracious, and mentioned nothing personal. Emily forwarded it to me with a single line. "Chapter closed. Feels good." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and "proud of you." No more needed saying. The kids grew into their own small worlds, Leela discovering a passion for writing stories she illustrated herself, Rowan joining a junior robotics club, where he spent Saturdays building bots that rolled across the floor with surprising speed. Emily and I found ourselves with more breathing room, date nights that stretched past midnight, spontaneous road trips when the grandparents offered to watch the kids, quiet mornings where we drink coffee on the porch swing and planned nothing more ambitious than what to cook for dinner. One autumn evening, after a long day of parent-teacher conferences and grocery runs, Emily came home with a small velvet box she'd hidden in her purse. She waited until the kids were in bed, then sat beside me on the couch and opened it. Inside was a simple silver band engraved with our wedding date and the words, "Always beside." She slipped it onto my finger next to my original ring. "I got this because I realized I'd stopped wearing reminders of what matters most. You never stopped showing up. I want to match that." I turned the ring, feeling the engraving under my thumb, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like coffee and home. "You already do." Life kept moving. Birthdays with too many candles, anniversaries celebrated with weekend getaways, summers at the beach house where the kids built sand empires, and we walked hand in hand at dusk, talking about dreams we still wanted to chase. There were hard days too, work stress that spilled over, arguments about whose turn it was to handle the leaky roof, moments when old insecurities whispered. But we met them differently now, with quick apologies, honest conversations, and the quiet knowledge that we'd already survived a real fracture and come back stronger. The choice to step back quietly had rippled outward in ways neither of us could have predicted. It hadn't just saved our marriage, it deepened it, taught us both that love thrives not in the absence of tension, but in the courage to face it without armor. Emily no longer compartmentalized her worlds. She brought all of herself to every room, work, home, friendships, and I stood beside her in all of them, not because I had to prove anything, but because being there felt like the most natural place in the world. And in the ordinary moments, the way she still reached for my hand when we walked the kids to school, the way I still left her coffee with a heart in the foam, the way the 4 of us fit together on the porch swing watching fireflies rise from the grass, we found the proof that what started as a single quiet decision had become the foundation of everything that followed. A family rooted in trust, a partnership built on presence rather than performance, a life where the past informed but never controlled the present. Years later, when friends asked the secret to staying married through careers, kids, and all the ordinary chaos, Emily would glance at me with that same soft smile and say, "Sometimes the strongest move is the quietest one." He stepped back when I asked him to, and in so doing showed me exactly where I wanted him to stand, right beside me. And I'd squeeze her hand, knowing the real answer was simpler still. We chose each other again and again, not because it was easy, but because it was true. And that truth, spoken in silence as much as in words, had carried us further than any grand gesture ever could. Time kept its steady pace, carrying us through the ordinary miracles and quiet challenges that make up the middle years of a long marriage. Lila turned 12 that fall, suddenly all sharp elbows and sharper opinions, her room a gallery of posters and half-finished stories pinned to corkboards, while Rowan, 10 and still wide-eyed with wonder, had discovered coding through a school robotics program and spent afternoons in the garage turning cardboard boxes into prototype launch pads for imaginary Mars missions. The new house had fully become home. The porch swing creaked under familiar weight. The backyard swing set bore the dents and paint chips of countless summers. The kitchen island held permanent marker ghosts from homework sessions and grocery lists. Emily's career had reached a place of quiet authority. She led cross-functional teams now, mentored women who reminded her of her younger self, and had even started a small internal workshop series on work-life integration that drew standing room crowds because she spoke from experience rather than theory. I'd shifted too. My own consulting work had grown into a small firm with 2 partners and a handful of junior analysts, giving me the flexibility to be the parent who handled drop-offs, doctor visits, and the endless parade of school projects. We traded roles without scorekeeping, the way couples do when they've learned that partnership isn't about perfect equality, but perfect willingness. One crisp October weekend, the kids away at a sleepover with cousins, Emily suggested we revisit the beach house we used to rent every summer, the same weathered gray cottage with the wide deck overlooking the dunes. We booked it on impulse, packed light, and drove the familiar route with windows down and music low, the kind of drive where conversation drifts in and out like the tide. When we arrived, the place smelled exactly the same. Salt air, old wood, faint sunscreen from previous renters. We walked the beach at sunset, barefoot in the cooling sand, and she slipped her hand into mine without a word. Halfway down the shore, she stopped, turned to face me, wind tugging at her hair. "Do you ever think about that gala?" she asked. I nodded. "Sometimes. Not with anger. More like gratitude." She laughed softly. "Gratitude? I almost pushed you away." "But you didn't," I said. "Not really. You asked for space, I gave it, and we both saw what mattered most. Absence clarified presence." She looked out at the waves rolling in, silver under the fading light. I still remember walking into that ballroom alone and feeling like part of me was missing, not because I needed an escort, but because I needed my anchor. You were never just there to fill a seat. You were there to remind me who I was when the lights were bright and the expectations were high. I pulled her closer against the chill. "And you reminded me that love isn't possessive. It's trusting enough to let someone stumble and still be waiting when they look up." We stood like that until the sky turned deep indigo, then walked back to the cottage, lit the gas fireplace, opened a bottle of the same red we'd drunk on our honeymoon, and talked until the fire burned low. No rehashing old wounds, just acknowledging how far the small choice to step back had carried us. The next morning, we woke to fog rolling in off the water, the world soft and muffled. Over coffee on the deck, Emily said, "I want to do something for our 20th anniversary next year. Not a big party, just us. Maybe renew our vows on this beach, simple, with the kids and a few friends. No performance, just truth." I smiled across the table. "I'd like that." Back home, the rhythm resumed. School runs, soccer practices, late-night help with science projects, quiet evenings where Emily would find me in the study and curl up in the armchair with a book while I finished emails. The kids started noticing the small ways we still chose each other. Lila caught us slow dancing in the kitchen once to a song on the radio and rolled her eyes dramatically, but later drew a picture of Mom and Dad being gross but cute. Rowan asked why we still held hands when we walked to the park, and Emily answered simply, "Because it feels good to know someone's walking with you." The anniversary arrived on a clear June day, much like the one of that long-ago gala. We gathered a small group on the same beach, our parents, a handful of closest friends, the kids in their best clothes looking half awkward, half thrilled. No officiant, no elaborate setup, just us standing barefoot in the sand, waves whispering behind us, exchanging words we'd written ourselves. Emily went first, voice steady but thick with emotion. 10 years ago, I thought love needed protection from the world. You showed me it doesn't. It needs presence. Thank you for stepping back when I asked, and for always stepping forward when it mattered. I choose you, every ordinary day, every hard one, every quiet one in between. When it was my turn, I looked at her, older now, laugh lines deeper, eyes still the same warm brown, and said, "I promised to love you in good times and bad. I didn't know then how much the bad would teach us. That night I stayed home wasn't a defeat. It was the moment we both remembered what we'd built was stronger than any shadow from the past. I choose you too, not just beside me, but ahead of me, behind me, with me, always." We exchanged new rings, simple bands engraved with the date of that gala, a private reminder that sometimes the hardest moments become the strongest anchors. The kids cheered louder than anyone, friends wiped eyes, and as the sun dipped toward the horizon, we walked back up the beach hand in hand, the same way we'd walked after every hard conversation since. Life continued its gentle unfolding. More birthdays, more milestones, more ordinary Tuesdays that felt extraordinary because we were in them together. The choice to step back quietly had long since stopped being about that one night. It had become the quiet foundation of everything that followed. A marriage where absence once clarified presence, where trust was earned in silence as much as in words, and where two people learned that the deepest love isn't the loudest, but the one that endures the quiet spaces between heartbeats and still chooses to show up. And in every sunrise since, in every shared glance across a crowded room, in every hand held on a familiar beach, that choice echoed. We didn't just survive the tension, we let it reveal us. And in the revealing, we became more fully ourselves, more fully each other's. The house grew louder and quieter in turns as the children moved through their teenage years, the once constant chaos of small feet and spilled juice giving way to slammed doors, late-night texts, and the sudden silence of empty rooms when they were out with friends or at sleepovers. Leela turned 16 that winter, driver's license fresh in her wallet, already planning college visits with the same focused intensity she once used to build blanket forts, while Rowan, 14 and taller than Emily now, spent most evenings in his room coding apps he swore would change the world, or at least get him into a good robotics program. The swing set in the backyard had been replaced by a fire pit, where we still gathered on clear nights, roasting marshmallows and listening to whatever music the kids deemed acceptable that month. Emily and I had learned to navigate the new rhythm, giving space when they needed independence, stepping in when the world felt too heavy, always ending the day with a quick check-in on the porch swing that still creaked under our weight. Our 20th anniversary renewal on the beach had become family legend. The kids still teased us about how Rowan had tripped in the sand during the photos, and Leela had insisted on reading her own vows that mostly involved promising to get a dog someday. We kept the tradition alive in small ways. Annual trips to that same gray cottage, now booked every July without fail, where the kids brought friends one year, then girlfriends and boyfriends the next, the deck crowded with laughter and sunscreen bottles. Emily's career had plateaued in the best sense. She'd turned down a C-suite offer that would have meant constant travel and chosen instead to consult part-time while teaching a graduate seminar at the local university on ethical leadership. The role suited her. Mornings in lecture halls sharing stories of real-world decisions, afternoons mentoring students who reminded her of her own early doubts, evenings home in time to cook dinner or help with college essays. She'd grown into a quiet confidence that didn't need external validation anymore. When colleagues asked how she balanced it all, she'd smile and say, "I don't. I just choose what matters most on any given day." I'd sold my share of the consulting firm to my partners, keeping a few long-term clients and shifting focus to woodworking full-time. Custom furniture now, pieces commissioned by word of mouth, each one carrying a small story. A dining table for a family who just adopted their third child. A desk for a writer finishing her first novel. The garage had become a proper workshop, smelling of sawdust and linseed oil, radio playing old rock while I measured twice and cut once. Emily would wander in sometimes, lean against the workbench, and watch me work without speaking, the silence between us comfortable and full. One late summer evening, after the kids had gone out for the night and the house felt unusually still, she found me sanding a cherry headboard for a client's anniversary gift. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a cold beer, sat on the old stool by the door, and watched the dust swirl in the shop light. After a while, she said, "I was cleaning out the attic today and found the dress from that gala." I paused the sander, looked up. "The navy one?" She nodded. "Still fits, mostly." A small smile touched her lips. I tried it on, just to see. Felt different this time. No nerves, no second guessing. Just me in a dress I used to wear like armor. I set the tool down, wiped my hands. "You don't need armor anymore." "I know," she said softly, "because you showed me I never really did. That night I asked you to stay home, I thought I was protecting something fragile. Turns out the fragile thing was me pretending I could handle everything alone. Your quiet step back didn't break us. It broke the illusion that I had to be perfect to be loved." I crossed the room, pulled her into a hug that smelled of sawdust and her shampoo. "You were never an illusion, just human, like me." She rested her head against my chest, "And you loved the human parts anyway, even when I tried to hide them." We stood like that until the shop lights buzzed overhead, then turned them off and walked back to the house hand in hand, the night air cool and full of cricket song. The kids came home later, noisy and full of stories, and we listened from the kitchen while they raided the fridge, the house filling again with the familiar chaos we'd come to cherish. As they headed upstairs, Leela paused at the door, looked back at us with that knowing teenage half-smile. "You two are so gross, but also goals." Emily laughed. "Get used to it, kid." When the house quieted again, we sat on the porch swing, blanket around our shoulders, watching the neighborhood lights wink off one by one. Emily leaned into me and said, "I used to think the hard parts were the tests, arguments, doubts, moments when the past showed up uninvited. But looking back, the real test was the quiet ones. The choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. The choice to step back when pushing forward felt righteous. The choice to trust that love would find its way back if we gave it room." I squeezed her hand, and it did. "Every time," she agreed. The swing creaked softly beneath us, the same rhythm it had kept for years, steady, unhurried, enduring. We didn't need to say more. The life we'd built spoke for itself. Children growing into their own truths, work that felt meaningful without consuming us, a partnership that had weathered storms not by avoiding them, but by facing them side by side, and sometimes by giving each other the space to face them alone. That single quiet decision years ago, to step back instead of demand, hadn't just revealed Emily's heart in a moment of absence, it had revealed ours over decades, in every small choice that followed. Love, we'd learned, isn't proven in the loud declarations or the dramatic reconciliations. It's proven in the silences we're willing to hold, the absences we're brave enough to allow, and the returns we make certain every single day. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the neighborhood slept, we sat together on that old swing, hands linked, hearts full, knowing the story wasn't ending, it was simply continuing, one quiet, deliberate step at a time. The house grew even quieter as the children left for college. Lila first, packing her car with boxes of books and art supplies, hugging us both fiercely at the curb before driving off to the state university 3 hours away, texting us photos of her dorm room the moment she arrived. Rowan followed 2 years later, choosing a tech institute on the coast, where the robotics program promised endless late nights and salt air. The swing set had long since been dismantled, the backyard fire pit now the center of smaller gatherings, friends over for wine and stories, Emily and I sitting side by side on the porch swing, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one. The empty rooms echoed at first, the silence almost startling after years of constant motion, but we filled them slowly with new routines. Mornings reading the paper together instead of rushing through breakfast, afternoons in the workshop, where Emily sometimes joined me now, sanding edges or staining wood, while we talked about nothing and everything. Our 35th anniversary arrived on a soft spring day, much like the one of that long-ago gala. Clear skies, light breeze, the kind of weather that makes you remember every season that came before. We didn't plan a big celebration. Instead, we drove back to the gray beach cottage, now ours outright after years of saving and one lucky inheritance from Emily's aunt. The place had been updated, new deck boards, fresh paint, a larger kitchen where we cooked simple meals, but the view remained the same. Endless dunes, endless waves, endless sky. We walked to the beach at dusk, barefoot as always, the sand cool under our feet. Emily carried a small canvas bag with 2 candles, matches, and the rings we'd exchanged at our renewal. When we reached the spot where we'd stood years before, she stopped, turned to me, and said, "I want to do this again, not because anything's broken, but because everything's still whole." I nodded, throat tight. We lit the candles in the wind-protected hollow of a dune, held hands, and spoke the words we'd carried for decades. Emily went first, voice steady but thick. 35 years ago, I thought love needed careful management, boundaries around the past, control over the present. You showed me love doesn't need fences, it needs open doors. Thank you for every time you stepped back when I asked, and every time you stepped forward when I needed you to. I choose you, not just for today, but for all the tomorrows we still have left. I swallowed, looked into eyes that had seen me through every version of myself, young and uncertain, middle-aged and steady, older now and still learning. I promised to love you in the light and the shadow. That night I stayed home wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of seeing us clearly. You weren't hiding from Mark or the past. You were hiding from the fear that you weren't enough without perfection. I stepped back so you could see you were enough, more than enough. And every day since, I've chosen to stand beside the woman who keeps choosing me back. I love you, Emily. Not the idea of you, not the polished version, just you. Always. We slipped the old rings off, placed the new ones, simple platinum bands engraved with that gala date and the word presents, and kissed under the fading sky while the candles flickered against the wind. The kids had sent messages earlier, Lila with a photo of her wearing the same navy dress Emily once wore, caption, "Borrowing tradition." Rowan with a video of him holding up a sign that read, "Don't mess it up, Dad." We laughed, cried a little, blew out the candles, and walked back to the cottage hand in hand. That night we sat on the deck under blankets, stars sharp overhead, and talked about the life behind us and the one still ahead. Grandchildren someday, maybe, more travel, more quiet evenings, more ordinary days that felt sacred because we'd chosen them. Emily leaned into me and said, "I used to think the hardest part was facing the tension. Now I know the hardest part is trusting that the quiet moments, the absences, the silences, the step backs, will bring us closer, not pull us apart." I kissed her temple. They did, every time. The years continued their gentle unfolding. Lila graduated and moved to the city for a publishing job. Rowan launched his first startup from a garage, not unlike mine, both of them calling home weekly with stories and laughter and the occasional crisis that still made them need their parents' voices on the line. Emily retired from teaching, but kept consulting on her terms, mentoring from home now, her office the sunroom where light poured in and coffee stayed hot. I kept building, furniture for our kids' first apartments, a crib when Lila announced her pregnancy, a rocking chair for the grandchild we met on a snowy December morning, tiny and perfect, and already loved beyond measure. The porch swing still creaked, the fire pit still glowed on clear nights, and every time Emily reached for my hand, across the kitchen island, during walks, in hospital waiting rooms when Rowan's appendix burst, or Lila's labor lasted 20 hours, I felt the echo of that one quiet choice years ago. It hadn't just revealed her heart in a moment of absence, it had revealed ours over a lifetime. Love, we understood at last, isn't measured by the absence of tension, but the presence we bring to it. Quiet when words would wound, steady when doubt creeps in, unwavering when the world asks us to choose easier paths. We chose each other, not once in a grand ceremony, but thousands of times in small, deliberate silences and returns. And in the end, that was the truest story we had. 2 people who stumbled, who stepped back, who stepped forward again, who built a life not perfect but real, not without shadows, but never without light. As the grandchildren grew and the house filled with new voices, we sat on that old swing watching fireflies rise from the grass, hands linked, hearts full, knowing the greatest revelation of all had been this simple truth. Sometimes the strongest love isn't the loudest declaration. It's the quiet decision to stay, to return, to choose presence over performance, every single day. and we had chosen, again and again, until the choice itself became the life we lived, whole, enduring, and entirely ours.